from the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
All of our health departments are in phase 1B now, which means that they are focusing on folks who are older. Generally we've said 65 or older, but health departments have flexibility to start at older folks. So, for example, in Central Health District, last week they were doing 90 years old. This week they're doing 80 years old. Douglas County is doing 75 years old. So you can see that's how some of the health departments are managing it to be able to make sure we're getting to those older folks first who are going to be more at risk.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, COVID vaccination efforts in Nebraska. Joining us via Zoom to talk more about it is Sarah Morgan. Sarah is an administrator with the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Public Health. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
You bet. I want to start by asking you to tell us just about the Department of Health and Human Services.
So DHHS is a pretty large organization. It's made up of 5 different divisions. We've got Children and Family Services, the Division of Behavioral Health, the Division of Developmental Disabilities, and of course Medicaid long-term care, and the division that I'm in, which is the Division of Public Health. And I might just focus on that particular division for a moment. Public health really focuses on preventive and community services. We look at things like surveillance, regulation of healthcare professions and facilities, and a lot of services that really help the most vulnerable Nebraskans and those who are most in need. The area that I oversee is called the Lifespan Health Services Unit. And in that unit, we have a variety of different programs that in large part are related to maternal and child health. So in my area, I have the WIC program, the Maternal Infant Early Childhood Home Visiting Program, cancer screening, our Title V Maternal Child Health Block Grant, newborn screening, and the immunization program. And that last one, immunizations, is of course the one that really is bearing the brunt of all the focus right now and most of the work around the COVID-19 vaccination effort.
Yes, I wanted to ask you pre-COVID-19, what did DHHS do with immunizations?
So the immunization program has a number of different prongs to it. Primarily, it's the Vaccines for Children program, and that is a program that really seeks to ensure that all children, regardless of their insurance status or their family's ability to pay, have access to the vaccines that we know really can prevent disease and mortality. There is a small adult immunization program as well, and there's some other work around school surveillance, and we respond to disease outbreaks, that sort of thing. But really, the VFC program has laid the foundation for our response here with COVID vaccine because it historically has operated much the same way that we're operating now, just on a smaller scale. So the federal government provides the vaccines free of charge. The state has a system whereby we can order the product, we can make sure that it's distributed to providers that are enrolled in the network, and we can collect the data that allows us to track how that product is used and which children are getting vaccinated.
Wow, so much on your plate. And then March of last year, COVID-19, of course, adds to all of your roles and responsibilities, which, again, based on what I'm hearing you say, gosh, no small task. How on earth did you guys manage that, Sarah?
Well, fortunately, we had some foresight. So I think a lot of folks, once the pandemic really hit, were expecting that a vaccine would be developed. I don't know that any of us expected it to be developed at the speed that it was, but certainly we knew that the federal government and the pharmaceutical companies were really joining forces to try to get a product ready. So we knew that at some point we would need to stand up and be prepared to create this distribution network. And we are fortunate here to have a team of really dedicated very expert individuals who can help. We've got epidemiologists, of course, our immunization program team, data analysis folks, and we really all pulled together to just begin planning from spring into the fall when things really started kicking into gear.
One of the things I've been asking folks as we're looking at the downside of all of this is the upside of that collaboration. And you mentioned that, you know, folks with whom you may not deal a whole lot now are coming around the table and having to work very, very quickly, very efficiently. Talk a little bit, Sarah, about that collaborative piece.
It's really, I think, been a testament to Nebraskans and how I think historically we come together in times of need and times of crisis to really do the right thing. So you're right. We've been fortunate to have involvement and collaboration from so many partners that we wouldn't normally work with. Traditionally, VFC has a network of local public health departments, our federally qualified health centers, and some private clinicians' offices. But before, we had not been really partnering that closely with our large healthcare systems, our hospital systems. So when COVID came out, those folks being willing to come to the table and bring their resources really did help us, especially with phase 1A, which was partially focused on healthcare providers. So having all of those folks at the table to help us get this distribution network really ramped up to the level that it needed to be was very beneficial.
Yeah, planning very critical, obviously, but being flexible with that plan, especially one like this. I know your latest revision was released on January 15th. We're going to put up the document here, and I notice your name there, Sarah. Talk to us about what we're seeing here.
Yeah, so this plan was originally drafted what seems like an eon ago, back in September, October of 2020, when we were really just getting started. And we did bring a lot of stakeholders together to really talk about, you know, what will this look like in Nebraska? And CDC is a great partner as well in offering templates for us to utilize and suggestions, recommendations. Certainly they put down some requirements for what we have to follow. But all that really allowed us to come up with a plan that I feel is fairly comprehensive. It is a high level overview. It's not going to get at a lot of detail, which was by design. Especially back in September, October timeframe, when we just really had no idea how it was going to look from at the ground level. But it's a comprehensive in that it includes the partners we're going to work with, the data systems that we're going to use, you know, the processes for getting providers enrolled, what our team is going to do in terms of offering technical assistance or quality assurance. All those things are captured in that plan. And as you say, we have revised it multiple times since then, because obviously you have to be flexible and things change, particularly once the vaccines were actually authorized and started to get distributed. We recognized some areas that just needed to be adjusted in the face of what was actually happening.
Okay, and the overall goal of the plan is what, Sarah?
Really to give that broad level overview for folks who are interested in how Nebraska is approaching this overall effort. Again, it's not going to get at the details, so I know that some folks look at that plan and they still have questions after reading it, but it is fairly comprehensive in hitting the main points of what's involved, and that's what we wanted, was to be fairly transparent with how we were approaching the distribution effort and the things that we were thinking of.
Okay, Nebraska residents, of course, can now register for the vaccine. There's a website we're going to put up here, but walk us through that process, Sarah.
We're really excited about this. It's something that we've been working on in development for about a month now, and honestly, I am so impressed with the team and how quickly they were able to get this product developed and made available. Ideally, people go to vaccinate.ne.gov, and they will have to provide some information about themselves, particularly their name, date of birth, some contact information. And there's a series of health questions that we're asking people to answer, which will help us determine which priority group they should be placed in. That information is really going into sort of a list, so to speak. We're just capturing people's information at this point, and working to really finish out some of the functionality so that we can basically get those folks connected to a provider in their area and then schedule an appointment. Now, it's important for folks to note that if they've gone to this website and they've registered, they may still have a period of time to wait. Phase 1B that we're in right now is a fairly large group of people. So our movement through that phase is really limited by the amount of supply that comes into the state. So it may take us a little bit to get everybody connected with that appointment.
What I can truly appreciate about all of this, especially in terms of how people become connected with you, is there's not just the website. The website is important, people can log on, but there are also folks out there who don't have computers. They're not quite as technologically savvy as some other folks are. We're going to put up some phone numbers, Sarah, and talk to us about how this all came into play.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We knew right off the bat that using a web-based tool is not necessarily the best choice for everybody. So we wanted to have an alternative there, and certainly we do encourage folks who struggle with a web-based option to maybe have a family member or a friend help them with that. But if that's not an option, they can call one of these phone numbers. We have a call center set up where they can assist somebody in getting registered into the system and answer any questions that they have. The other piece that I like to mention about this system is that it's not a first come, first serve kind of setup. So one of my colleagues calls it the Black Friday model, where you have to be first in line in order to get to the product that's in high demand. It's not set up like that. So if you don't get registered on hour one of day one, it's okay. It doesn't mean that everybody who got into the system before you is going to get served first. We're taking all these names, and then the system will eventually sort of randomly pull from the different priority groups. So you have as equal a chance as anybody else in the system to get to an appointment once it's available.
Okay, and we're going to put up a timeline in a few minutes, but first I want to ask you what drives the number of doses that are available. We have a scorecard that we're going to put up for our viewers as you walk us through this.
And this scorecard is relatively new for us, and I'm excited about this as well. It really does sort of talk about the number of doses that have been allocated to the state, the number of doses that have been administered. We break it out by first doses and second doses. The left-hand side shows the doses that are allocated to Nebraska that we sort of have control over distributing to our partners who administer those doses. On the right-hand side, it represents the doses that go to the long-term care facility pharmacy program, which is a little bit of a separate program that CDC runs and was really specifically geared to vaccinate residents and staff in our long-term care facilities. And just because it's a separate program, it's handled a different way, we wanted to separate that out to give a true picture of how the product is coming into the state and how quickly we're getting it administered. Want to just be very transparent and make sure people realize there's no sort of central warehouse where we're sitting on product for a period of time. We really do our best to get it out into the local level so that we can get those shots administered as soon as possible.
Okay, so for those folks at home wanting to know when might it be their turn, let's put this timeline up and tell us how you arrived at this then.
So where we're at right now is in phase 1B, as you can see from the timeline. The other piece that's good to look at here is all of the groups that are included in phase 1B. So at a broad brush strokes, it's our senior population, age 65 years of age and older. It's younger folks that have certain identified comorbidities. And then it's a variety of industry groups that have been deemed really critical to the state's operation. It's a pretty large group of people. I think the last count that we had was somewhere between 450 and 500,000 people, which is why that phase 1B is really going to stretch across 4 months at a minimum. Now, that's based on the amount of supply that's coming into the state now. I think that most of us are really hoping that the supply increases. Our current manufacturers are doing what they can to produce more product. And then there is a third vaccine that is really in the wings. We're just waiting for FDA to offer that emergency use authorization so that that can go into production and hopefully allow us to move through these phases even more quickly.
Sarah, I would imagine as some folks are looking at that timeline and they're seeing that their loved one, their older adult loved one, falls into that 1B category, they may be asking the question, and rightly so, because it's been so long since they've been able to go in and actually visit face to face with that person. They're looking at that and saying, okay, so if my loved one gets the required double dose there, do I get to go in? How would you respond to those family members asking that question?
Sure. And the answer might be a little different depending on if their older family member is in a long-term care facility or not. Only because the Center for Medicaid Services really does set the rules and the requirements around visitation in those facilities. And I think they're really looking at data to make sure that the protection is really there. Not so much to protect the individual from getting sick. I mean, we know the vaccine is effective. What we still don't know is how well it protects against transmission of disease. So we really just want to make sure that we're not continuing to spread the disease around. And I believe that CMS is mindful of that. Outside of those types of facilities, we recognize people still want to get together, but even then, I think people need to be very careful and continue to mask and socially distance themselves and avoid crowded places, just because, again, that risk of transmission still could be there, and not everyone is vaccinated. So while we're really excited to have this vaccine available and to get people vaccinated, it certainly isn't an immediate solution for us.
Okay, thank you. So folks have registered, and to your point, the timeline may change dependent upon the doses available and so forth. But let's say you've logged on and you've registered. What can folks expect then? Does somebody reach back to them, or how is all of that going to work?
Yeah, people, once they've registered, they will be notified when it's their turn. And it could happen a couple different ways. The part that's can be a little confusing is that right now we're in a bit of a transition period because the state registration system is recently launched, and many of our local health department partners have their own registry systems put in place right now. So for the next couple of weeks, the local health departments are working with us here at the state to make sure that we have really the list of people, and then they are reaching out to individuals to get them connected with an appointment. Once we transition fully over to the state system, people will get an email or a text notification that invites them to click a link. They can pick a provider that's in their area. And then once they've picked that provider, they'll also potentially have the option of scheduling their appointment. So once we get transition, right about the beginning of March to the state system, it really will be a nice and seamless one-stop shop. But until then, the local health departments are doing that outreach, so people don't need to worry about it. Once they've gotten registered, somebody should be reaching out to contact them when it's their turn.
Okay, and they'll provide them with all the necessary information, as you've stated, where they should go, that kind of thing. Another big question that seems to be top of mind for folks is, are 2 doses really necessary?
Yeah, short answer is definitely they are. And that's based on the current science that we know of now. Both products, the Moderna and the Pfizer, were really, all of their efficacy data was based on that 2-dose series. That's what the studies were designed to evaluate, and the data set that was submitted to the FDA, and that's how the EUA, the emergency use authorization, was approved. So we follow the science, and definitely really strongly encourage and recommend that people get the second dose just to make sure that they've reached their full level of immunity.
Okay, thank you. And what about side effects?
Sure, yeah. The most common side effects are you're pretty typical to like a flu shot. If people are used to getting a flu shot, then you're going to have some soreness in your arm, maybe some swelling. Folks have sort of reported fatigue, some achiness, and that really is a sign that your body's doing what it's supposed to do, which is building up immunity against the virus. There have been very few cases of more significant adverse side effects, and so we watch that very closely, and that's why there's a recommendation that patients be monitored for 15 minutes after they've gotten the vaccine, just to make sure that we don't have one of those rare situations where somebody has a more severe reaction.
Okay, and Sarah, when does immunity kick in? Typically
after the second dose. Yeah, you need both doses, and at that point then that's when you're fully immune.
So you're good right afterwards, other than that 15 minutes that you talked about for
the most part. Yeah, and I think the question is how long does that immunity last, and that's one of the things that we're still waiting to get more guidance on, depending on the data that's being collected now as this vaccine is being distributed and administered throughout the population.
And how many immunizations before you would say that Nebraska is on top of this pandemic?
Sure. So that's getting at a concept that we call herd immunity. That has changed, and people just have to remember that this is a new disease. It's a new virus, and so the vaccines are new. So we definitely, as science is supposed to do, sometimes see changes in what we know and what we recommend. So at this point, really want to see about 70 to 90% of the population vaccinated before we would consider that we have herd immunity. And that's really the term that just says enough people are vaccinated and protected that we don't have to worry about disease transmission so much. We recognize that there are definitely some people in the population that cannot, for some reason, get the vaccine. And so by having this larger portion of the population vaccinated, we can provide that protection to those more vulnerable people. That 70 to 90% range is a pretty wide range, but it's really because a couple of things. The different vaccine products have different levels of efficacy. And we have some new variants that are coming on the scene now. And while all evidence is pointing to the fact that the current vaccine products are still effective against those new variants, just still have to monitor all that and gather more data to see, what that's going to do to our overall immunity in the population.
Is there anybody who shouldn't receive this, Sarah?
Yeah, both the current products, Pfizer and Moderna, have the same contraindication, which is a history of severe allergic reaction to either the vaccine itself or any of the ingredients in the vaccine. So that's really the only contraindication. However, like with any vaccine or any medical procedure, you definitely want to talk with your doctor before getting the vaccine if you have any kind of underlying health condition that you feel might concern you. If you're pregnant, for example, if folks have concerns at all, you really want to have that conversation with your provider to make sure that you're an actual candidate for the vaccine.
Okay. Final question, kind of a tough one. We have about a minute remaining. What would you say after this 30 minutes? There are still going to be some people who are skeptical out there. What would you say to folks who are thinking, I'm still not convinced?
And I just to say, I can understand. We really have seen this vaccine come to market in a timeline that's unprecedented. So it really is understandable. But I would really encourage people to do some research on their own, and then again talk to your provider. There are a lot of good reasons and good explanations as to how this timeline came about and how we were able to get a viable, effective product on the market so quickly. And at this point, we've administered enough doses to really, I think, show that it is effective and safe. But if people still are skeptical, I really encourage them just to look into some of that research on their own and again, have a conversation with your provider.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Morgan, who's with the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services, here to give us lots of information today. We would obviously encourage people to log on to your website. And so, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go to that website now, and a phone number, dhhs.ne.gov. That phone number, 800-798-1696. As we close, a look at scenes from Stinson Park in Omaha is seen through the lens of Derek Shadle, a junior at UNO. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
For more than 20 years, only one program has addressed topics that matter to viewers. Only one program delivers the information that Nebraskans need to live the good life. I'm Kathy Wyatt. Join my guests and me as we discuss those issues every week on a program we call Consider This.